coast to coast.
Okay, that was a really interesting session, wasn't it? Let's give another round of applause. If you found that one interesting, I'm sure you'll find this one interesting also, because we're going to take the time machine. We're going to go from 10,000 years plus behind now to about 2,500 years ago. Vivek Kaisare is our next speaker. He's going to talk about the migration of patterns of GSBs. He is by profession in the pharmaceutical industry, and he is a published author in that space. He also is a published author in the GSB history. His book is called From Sapta, Sindhu to Sapta, Konkan, The Incredible Journey of Gouda, Saraswat, Brahmans, and that's also the title of his talk today. So please join me in welcoming Vivek.
Thank you, Sindhu, for the kind introduction, and also I'd like to thank the organizers for giving me this opportunity to come here and share with you a new kind of history book. So I'm keen on, and as far as my qualifications, I think I actually outdo Dr. Rao in terms of writing a history book. So I hope she'll feel better about this. So in terms of identity, here is one way I can describe myself, right? My name is Vivek Kaisare. I was born in Mumbai, and born and raised in Mumbai actually. Live in New Jersey now with my wife, Shantala and Sachi. And you can see their pictures on the right-hand side. Professionally speaking, I make a living in the world of pharmaceuticals. And interest-wise, I have a bunch of different interests to try to mix it up, do different things, keep fit, hike, work out, listen to a lot of music. I just love music. And then I read, write, and then do a few talks from time to time, like I'm doing one right now. So those are my interests, and that would be one way of describing me, right? However, who am I really in terms of identity? Does that description cover my cultural identity or my historical identity? Not really, right? So I've had questions like the ones you're seeing on the screen for years. And at least up to 10 years ago, I didn't have any of these answers. Why are we called Saraswat Brahmans, GSBs? And while I'm on the subject, I must say, I have a bunch of friends here who are Chitrapur Saraswats, and when I use the term GSB, I mean it in an all-encompassing, inclusive way. And the only reason I picked that title for my book was because I wanted to make sure that the journey was captured in the title. Because we were from the Gouda region, who then came to Sapta Konkan, and I had to make sure that people understood that. So that was the sentiment behind it. So all these questions about what's a Mool Purush, what's a Kula Daivat, why am I expected to go to a specific temple, why are pujas done a certain way, why is the Purohit or the Pujari asking me for my Gotra? These are the questions that I think, I would go to these temples and there would be a lot of rituals conducted without my appreciating anything I was doing, to be honest, right? So, about 10 years ago, I sort of began my search because I at least wanted to understand what I was trying to do. So around that time, I found out that there were, at least I was able to trace back about 5 generations on my paternal side, my father's side, and 9 generations on my maternal side. So I got a good sense for who my great-grandparents were, where they came from, and at least the more recent aspects of the migrations were sort of corroborated. I at least had a sense for where we belong in recent history. That wasn't enough. So I figured, let's go even further back in the past. And the logical place to start was other GSB history books, right? So there's a lot of authors who've done stellar work on documenting GSB history. Okay, so I'll just take a few names, you can read them. From 1930s onwards, names like Talmaki, Kurwa, Dhume, Kenny, Kama, Dhume again. Dhume was the, CVS Dhume was the son of N.S. Dhume. And then even non-GSB and non-Indian authors like Dr. Conlon, or Mr. Conlon. So I think a lot of authors have written about GSB history. So did I really need to write another book on GSB history? Well, kind of. And the reason I wrote this book was if you look at history as it's been presented by authors so far, there's something I walked away thinking was missing. Okay, and to explain to you really quickly, my timeline starts from about 3000 BC, from approximately Rig-Vedic times. And I'm not going to get into an argument about the exact dating because this is an approximate timeline, it's a cartoon. And what I'm trying to say here is, for the most part, if you look at past GSB authors, most of them didn't dwell too much on ancient history starting way back in 3000 BC or even a little further back and after. And as they went along and written documentation began to become available, there was more and more depth as you approached modern history. That's logical because modern history is a lot more reliable, there's a lot more documentation that's available, it's easy to reference. It's harder to speak about times back here when we were, about 3000 BC before written documentation was readily available. So, in terms of the depth of information provided, what I was fascinated about while growing up during my childhood was these references to our great sages and our Gotra Rishis and our Prava Rishis, Vishwamitra and Vashisht and all these your Gotra Rishis like Kaundinya, Vatsa, Kaushika, whatever your family belongs to. And I wanted to get some corroboration to the extent possible on the ancient history side of things. So I wrote this book almost in reverse to fit sort of in a complementary way with previous authors. So the depth of the information in my book, which I have here by the way if somebody's interested in it, is more so on the earlier side of history, and because there's enough presented on later history, I decided to not focus on that too much. So the first difference is really the area of focus. Which part of history did I want to focus on? Okay? And I'll tell you the second way is different in a few slides. So the automatic question that comes up is, why were there gaps? I mean, weren't people really capable of writing this kind of a book? I'd say sure they were, but sometimes it's a matter of where you look and what a person's expertise is, or what's available. You have to remember what we have at our fingertips now in terms of digital libraries and easy ways. I mean, information is literally at our fingertips. That was not the case when Mr. Talmaki wrote his book in 1930. It was very difficult to get and subscribe to a library and then eventually check out a book after a month. It was very hard to do. So, I mean, you have to give them credit for what they did. But what we are able to do now is a little different. Okay, what you see is there's plenty of history, Rig-Vedic history and geography. Of course, there's our old scriptures like the Manusmriti and the Skanda Puran. Okay, and then there's this whole other set of, an independent set of research, which is what they call the Indus Valley Civilization, or what I prefer to call the Sindhu Saraswati Civilization. So there's a lot of information that's out there available. Unfortunately, most people don't connect the dots. These are two separate streams of research. People either focus here or focus there, right? Similarly with Indian history, right from the Middle Ages, same story. People focus here, but maybe not there. It's a matter of perspective, it's a matter of focus and interest. So all I did really was, I looked very carefully at Rig-Vedic history and geography. So the Rig Veda is not just it's not just information about a bunch of agricultural ancestors of ours who used to pray to the Maruts or to the elements. There was also geography and history attached inside the Rig Veda. There are arguments against that, but I'm in the belief, or at least the camp, that there was history and geography in the Rig Veda. Similarly, archaeological evidence, a lot of geological evidence, hydrological evidence, a lot of that comes from this side in the Indus Valley civilization. Okay? And the third, of course, is written, documented history. Like I said, I didn't really spend too much time on that because there's already a lot of that. I didn't want to be redundant. So, what resulted was, in this book, there is a conceptual framework which is sort of top down and bottom up. And essentially what I try to do is connect the dots between all our Gotra rishis, what we hear in our traditional history, in our itihas, as we call it, and see how much can be corroborated by various disciplines. So it's a multidisciplinary approach. So, without going into too many details here, the kinds of things that I focused more on was geological works about the river Saraswati. Now, I don't know how many of you have actually read history books carefully, the GSB history books. The odd thing that I always noticed was, for all the talk about us being Daud Saraswat Brahmans, meaning we came from the river Saraswati, I noticed, on average, there was a page or maybe a page and a half dedicated to that river. And there is a plethora of information and depth of knowledge that is available out there discussing this topic about the fate of the river Saraswati. And I really wanted to kind of document that carefully, because without really establishing that whole piece of information, it's incomplete. So as a result, I think what I ended up with is a new type of book. It's got a lot more information than previous authors have provided, in some ways, not in all ways. And in particular, I would like to point out life during Rigvedic times, the Saraswati, the river, what happened to it, and also the migrations. The first half of the migration from the Saraswati to the Gouda region, and then subsequently to the Sapta Konkan area, are sort of, I've used different ways of telling the story. So I'm going to come to the second difference in the way the books are written. So the book I've written is different in that the story is told differently. It's not very descriptive in terms of just text after text after text. I've tried to mix it up. So there's history, but there's also mythology, just to kind of interlace it with it, so you get some context for what is happening in the historical side. It's illustrated. I've also used some software to actually find all those points along that migratory path. And that was fascinating because, believe it or not, if you use the right softwares, those actual places exist and you can actually pull them up on a modern map. So those things are actually documented in the book. Other than that, there are things like sidebars, things like definitions or context that needs to be provided for some of the things just to be better appreciated. Okay? That's how it's different. So the two ways is different is the way the story is told and where the focus is. So you're going to ask the question of, why should I buy this book, or why should I buy this book? I mean, I have to convince you, at two levels. I mean, why this book and why should I buy this book? So I'll give you three good reasons. And why don't I start with reason number two first? The reason number two is that the information in that, I think, will make your life, I hope, because it did that for me, more meaningful. All the rituals come to life. Every time you sit in front of a havan, or you sit in front of in a temple, and you are expected to pay homage to your ancestors, you would know who to think of, you would know why you're thinking of them, and I think your prayers would be heard in a better way if you did that. So I won't go into the details here, but it's important to know, why am I aligned to this particular mutt? Why not the Partagali mutt? Why do I have to go to Kavle mutt? Or vice versa. Right? So these things are really, really critical. So here, don't take my word for it. There's a few testimonials from people who I consider very knowledgeable or well achieved. The first one is Sri Ganesh Kantak. I'll let you read it. It's pretty busy, but at the end of the day, I think they really appreciate what's been done, so you'd rather hear from somebody else versus me. But I have one little last question to ask you, and it's a true or false question. So, and I want to get a sense for what the knowledge levels are in the room, because that would be yet another reason for why you should be considering buying a book. So let me ask you, so, true or false? The sage who composed the Mahamrutyunjay mantra is Vishwamitra. Is that true or false? Who says true? You sure? Actually, it's a pretty good answer. The answer is false. So that's fantastic. Let me ask you one last one. The Saraswati River, it dried up in 4000 BC. True or false? Who says false? You say false. Who else says false? Okay, I see a couple of falses. You did well again. Actually, it's true. So I don't know if it's a fluke or not, but here's the deal. If you're interested and if you know that much, I would submit that you should try and consider reading this book if you get a chance. I'm going to be around here, so if you're interested in it, do let me know, and we'll try to make sure you get those books. Okay? So I'm in the exhibit area. I'm also hanging around, and you'll probably find me in a food line somewhere. So come see me, and I hope to see you. And I really enjoyed your company for the last 2 days. Thanks very much. Do we have any time for questions? I guess not, right? Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. Very interesting. Let's give another round of applause to Vivek, please. Vivek, I'm sorry I may have missed it. How do we get your book? How do we get your book?
So, like I was telling the folks, I have quite a few copies with me. I have a booth that's set, unfortunately it's a little bit off to the side, so you may not be able to see it easily. But either you have to bump into me in the hallway and then we can kind of make an arrangement, or you can just come by the booth and I'll get it. On the way to the Hilton, exactly right.
Okay, thank you. And as a token of appreciation, we have something to give you. 1 minute, please.
Right. Thanks everyone for attending this seminar, and thanks Vivek for this wonderful presentation. I think between the previous one and this one, there was a lot of information to cover about our history. Thank you. And on behalf of the Konkani Sammelan, we really want to award this to you, this token of appreciation. Thank you so much.